Hello, and welcome back to another Unity Tiny video. In this video, we will be adding in a health system and a death system. We will also be adding in animations for when you take damage. What you see here is the result of this video. Your character applies 3 different stages of damage to the enemy based off what stage in the combo he is currently in. Starting with 5, 10, then 15 damage, for a total of 30 damage per combo. We also set up our enemy to play animations with the exact same components and code as our player is using. And in the next video, we will start adding in an AI controller to control what our enemy should be doing using all the same code as our player besides the inputs. But for now, we can go into Unity and I'll show you the setup we will be using to achieve the effects of this video. You can see I've replaced the enemy sprite we were using in the last video with a duplicate of the player entity. The only thing different being I have removed the player input component. You'll also notice the new fields for the hurt and dying animations, along with the new health component. If we take a look at the scripts folder, you can see we added in a health system and a death system. And you're probably wondering why I would make these 2 separate scripts. This is to keep our code more organized and clean, and also is a way to decouple the health system from the death system, so we are not forced to need health, or to have a health component at all on our entities. We have also added in some new components, those being the dying component, the health component that you saw earlier, and the play one-shot component. The health component is pretty self-explanatory. It controls how much health an entity currently has and what its max health is set to. The dying component is added to a character after his health reaches 0, which initiates the death animation and handles removing the character after the animation finishes playing. And finally, our play one-shot component, which pretty much does exactly what it says, will play any animation you pass through it one time. Then go back to playing whatever animation the system says it should currently be playing. And as always, if you don't want to watch the previous videos but you do want to follow along with this video, you can download the previous videos projects in the link below. Also in that link will be the finished project from this video in case you don't want to watch the rest of the video, but that would make my watch time pretty sad. And you wouldn't want to do that, would you? If you are enjoying this tutorial series, maybe consider liking and subscribing to help my channel. Doing that lets me know which video series needs more attention and what series I should create more videos for. Now, to get started, let's open our Unity project from where we left off in the previous video. The first thing we're going to do is delete the old sprite entity that we were using, and then duplicate the player, rename it to enemy. We're going to remove the player input component, and then on all of our animations we can select them all, go to the color, and change it to a slightly red color so it'll have a red tint on the sprite to give it an enemy appearance. We'll move him over here, and in my project my player is not up here, so I'm just going to move him over here. Now, the first programming thing we are going to do is add in the hit reactions for the character, but before that we need to refactor some of the code in our animation system to make this easier for us to do. So in our animation system, currently we have a play attack animation and a play movement animation, but I believe we can combine these into one animation system that can also deactivate all the other animations it is not using. so we will be able to better optimize how we are using disable movement and disable attack animations. To get started, we'll go ahead and start making our new play animations function. So we'll say static play animation on the world ut.world. Then we'll ask for an animations, which is a game.animations. And we are going to add another field called override for if we want the animation that is currently playing to be interrupted and played again by the same animation. So we'll say override boolean equals false because this is an optional parameter. Now in here we'll say if override is equal to false and animations.state is equal to state, will return. And if those values are not true, we'll set the animations.state equal to the state that we passed in through the function. We'll store an ut.entity and call it animations. Then we will do a switch statement over our state to decide which animation we should be playing. So we'll put state here. And we currently have 6 animations, so we'll make our switch statement have 6 cases. In the first case, we'll say animation equal to animations.run. The second will be idle. The third will be jumping. The fourth, fifth, and sixth will be the 3 attack animations. Now we'll say this.reset animation time world animation. This will be for resetting the animation time of the animation we want to play, so the animation will start at the beginning of the animation. Next we'll say game service.set entity enabled. We'll pass in the world. And then we'll say animations.run. And then state equal to 0. So it will set it to enabled or disabled depending on the state that we pass in. We'll now do this for the rest of our animations. The reason we aren't just setting it to true or false inside of the case is because it would only set true or false to the state that we passed in, and we would have to write more code for actually disabling them. We could set it to true in the case, and then before the case is ran, set everything to false, but then we would be setting the animation we are about to play to false, then back to true instead of just setting it to true. Now that we have our play animations function set up, let's go ahead and set up our play one shot function for playing an animation one time. We'll say static play one shot. We'll ask for a world, an entity, then we want a length that the animation should play for. and the animation that we want to play, which will be the state. Inside of here, we'll say if world.hasComponent, we'll be looking for the play one shot component. So to be able to do that, we first need to go back into our Unity editor and add the one shot component. Once in your editor, go to the Components folder, right-click, Create, Tiny, Component, and call it Play One Shot. On this component, we'll add two fields, both of them being float 32s. The first one will be named Time Played, which will store the amount of time that the animation has been playing for. We'll add another float 32 called a length, which will hold the length the animation should play for. Now, going back into our animation script, we can continue to say if world.hasComponent entity game.playOneShot. If it does have the play one shot component, that means that we are interrupting the animation to play it again. So we'll say let one shot equal world.getComponentData entity and game.playOneShot oneshot.length or oneshot.timeplayed. Let's save our file so the values will show up. Then we'll say oneshot.timeplayed is equal to 0, then oneshot.length is equal to length. We'll then say world.setComponentData for the entity using the one shot component. Now we'll say let anim equal world.getComponentData entity and game.animations. This will store our animations component from our entity into a variable called anim, and using this we'll say this.playAnimation world anim state true. Then we will return. And if the entity did not have a play one shot component, that means we need to add the play one shot component. So we'll say let one shot equals new game.playOneShot, and then one shot.length is equal to length, and world.addComponentData will add the one shot component to our entity. After that, we can copy and paste the let anim equals world.getComponentData and the this.playAnimation and just paste it onto here. Now we can go through this file and refactor it using our new functions. So if we scroll up to here, instead of saying play movement animations and disable attack animations, we can get rid of disable attack animations, rename this to say play animation, rename this also to say play animation, same with this one. Let's scroll down and find other areas we can make look better. We can remove the play movement and play attack animations functions. We can also remove the disable movement animations function and the disable attack animations functions and add in a new function called static disable animations to make our code cleaner. So we'll say static disable animations we'll ask for a world, which is a ut.world, then an animations, game.animations, and it's a void. Inside of here, we'll just set all of our animations to false. So we can just copy and paste both of these. And then after that, we can delete both of these functions. Let's save this file and go back into our editor and see if we have any errors. We currently do. If we go here, it says we no longer have the play attack animations. We can just replace this with play animation and then scroll up and do the same with this one. Let's save and go back into our Unity editor and see if we have all of our errors fixed. We'll click clear, go back in, put a space in, save, go back into Unity, and we'll see that we have no errors. Now let's create the animation for your hit reaction when you take damage. Go to your enemy sprite and duplicate the attack animation 3, change the name to hurt animation, and get rid of the 3. The hurt animation will start with the 59th sprite in the sprite file that we are using. So go into your graphics folder, expand the adventurer sheet, look for the 59th sprite. Now we can increase our thumbnail size to be able to see the sprites easier. Let's click on the hurt animation, go ahead and drag this into the default sprite location and in the first animations frame location. The hurt animation is only 3 frames long, so let's go ahead and delete that down and then drag the other 2 frames into the animation. Confirm you drug the correct sprites in. And then after that, let's go ahead and create our death animation while we are here. So duplicate it again, call it death animation. The death animation starts with the 60-second sprite, so we can find that one. And the death animation is 7 frames long, so let's add in some more frames. Drag your 60-second sprite into the default sprite location. And then replace the 6 sprites with the death animation sprites. Confirm you put the correct sprites in. Now let's go to our components and add in the new animations to the animation states component. You can just duplicate attack 3 and rename it to hurt, and then duplicate it again and rename it to dying. Let's go to our animations component and duplicate the attack 03 so we can drag in references for the hurt and dying animation. So duplicate 2 times and name it hurt and dying. Then we'll go to the enemy sprite and drag in the hurt animation and the dying animation. We'll now duplicate the hurt and death animation and drag it under our player, making sure to change the sprite color back to a solid white color. We'll then go to our player component and drag in the hurt and dying animations. Now we can go back into our script folder and inside of the attack system, we can go to the apply hit impulse function that we set up in the previous video. And if you look at how we set the apply hit impulse function up in the last video, it's actually applying the hit impulse throughout the entire time that the animation is playing, as long as the character that you're trying to attack is within the distance and you are facing that character. So we want to refactor this to only be able to apply the hit 1 time per step of the combo. To do that, we are going to go back into our Unity editor, and inside of here, we're going to go to our attack component. And how we are going to do it, we are going to make it to where you can only attack one character at a time. Maybe in a future video, we'll make it where you can attack multiple characters without it applying the damage multiple times while still being able to reset the attack per step of the combo while not messing up any of the interactions with any other characters who may be taking damage. But that takes a lot more code. And for now, we'll just add in a variable on the attack component called hit, which will be a boolean. And once you hit an enemy, this boolean will be set to true, so you cannot damage that enemy or any other enemy during that step of your combo. So going back into our attack system, we can say, first let's save and then go back into Unity and come back in so that it brings up the hit value that we added to the attack component. And now let's go to our apply hit impulse function. We'll move this down a couple lines. We'll say let ATK for attack equal world.getComponentData from the entity using game.attack. Now we have our game.attacks component from the entity stored in a variable called attack. Then within the for each inside of our two if statements, we'll say attack.hit equals true, then world.setComponentData. We'll say world.setComponentData using the entity and the attack component. After that, we'll say animation system dot play one shot using the world and destructible ENT. We want to play the animation for 0.61 seconds. This is a value I came up with while doing testing. If you want to change it for your project, feel free. And then the animation we want to play is the sixth animation, which is the hurt animation, which we still need to set up in the animation system. So we can go ahead and do that now. To set it up, we need to add it to our play animations function. By copy and pasting this, we'll change this to say case 6 and this to say animations.hurt, and we can go ahead and add in the dying animation while we are at it. Then here we can copy and paste this twice, say hurt and dying, and then 6 and 7. Now that we have our hurt and dying animation set up in the animation system, we can go back into the attack system and finish the code, which all we need to do is go down to the iterate combo, and inside of here, we want to make attack.hit equal to false when you go to the next step of the combo, so that you're able to hit the entity again. Let's go back into our Unity project and let it compile. So one thing I've learned from the Unity Tiny Forums, if you don't read through the Unity Tiny Forums, it's one of the best places to go to learn new things. If you're having issues with how long it takes you to enter and exit play mode for your project, you can go to Tiny and disable the enable play mode, and then when you play the game, and go back into Unity, you'll see that the play button isn't actually clicked, so we can make changes to the game. We can disable the player, click play again, without having to unclick play to just reload the new values of our project. This makes editing and workflow way faster, so I suggest using it. But let's re-enable our player. Click play again, go into our browser, and see if our hurt animations are working. You can see that the enemy is doing the correct idle and fall animations. but our attacks aren't hurting him, nor are they making him play the animation. If we hit 12, we'll see that we have no errors, so there must be something we forgot to do inside of the system. If we go into our animation system, we need to actually increase the time played that the play one shot has been playing for. So we can just say inside of our onUpdate, outside of this.world.forEach, we'll make another one. So say this.world.forEach. And for every component that has a ut.entity and a game.playOneShot, we'll call them entity and one shot. Now inside of here, we'll say one shot dot time played plus or equal to this dot scheduler dot delta time. And now if one shot dot time played is greater than or equal to one shot dot length, we need to remove the component. So we'll say this.world.remove component off of the entity. The component we want to remove is the game.playOneShot. Let's save and go back into Unity and see if it's working now. After your scripts compile, click play. And if you fall down and go and attack the enemy player, you'll see that it's still not working. So let's go back into our Unity project and try to figure out what else we forgot to do. We also need to add the destructible tag back to the enemy entity. So add the destructible tag and click play, and let's see if it works now. Walk up to your enemy, push the attack button, and you'll see he'll fly extremely high up into the air. That's because we still have his density and friction at 0. Let's put his friction at 0.5 and his density at 10. Click play again. Walk up to him, attack, and you'll see that he's playing the animation, but he's still flying pretty high into the air. So let's make a few adjustments really quick. If we go back into our Unity project and into the script files, we'll go into the attack system. And the reason that it looks like so much force is being applied is because we never changed this to only play one time. So if we actually add in and attack.hit with a lowercase a, attack.hit equals false by putting an explanation in front of it, it'll only allow this to play while the attack.hit is set to false. We'll go back into our Unity editor, click play again, and see what it looks like. You can see now that the animation is playing better, but it is staying on this animation and not going back to the previous animation. So let's figure out why. One thing we still need to do is right here we need to put an OR and say this.world.hasComponent entity and game.playOneShot. We also need to add in the hurt and dying animations into the disable animations function. Then the last thing we need to do is, if you scroll up, we also need to set the animation component data after we get it. So we'll say world.setComponentData for entity and anim. We'll say the same thing right here. Save your file, go back into your Unity project and click play. Go into your game and let's see if that fixed it. We'll walk over to the enemy entity and attack it and see that he stops playing his hurt animation after the allotted time that we put in. You can do your full combo and see he resets his hurt animation on each step of the combo. Cool. The next thing we're going to do is add in the health system and dying. So we'll go back into our Unity project. Let's go into our components folder, create a health component and a dying component. So go to create, tiny, component. We'll call this one health. And on the health component, we are going to add 2 float 32s, one called current HP and one called max HP. Now we'll create a dying component. And on here, we need to add the same fields as we have on the play one shot component. So we'll add a float 32 for time played and a float 32 for length. Let's go to our enemy and add the health component to it. Make his current HP 100 and his max HP 100. Let's now go into our scripts folder and create a health system. Open that file up and we'll begin to code out our health system. Inside of here, we're going to have a static function called adjust health. We'll be referencing a world, which is a ut.world, an entity, which is a ut.entity, and a value, which is a number. Then inside of here, we'll say if world.hasComponent entity game.health. If it does have a health component, then we'll say let health equal world.getComponentData off of the entity, and the data we want is the health component. We'll then say health.currentHP minus or equal to value, and now we need to set the component by saying world.setComponentData entity health. Now we'll say if health.currentHP is less than or equal to 0, we need to die, which we'll set that up in a minute, so we'll just type die in for now. Now, outside of this if statement, we'll say else, meaning if it does not have a health component, we just want to die when it takes damage. Now let's set up our dying function. So the function is actually just going to be adding our dying component onto the entity to initiate the dying system. So we'll say static die, which will need a world, and an entity. And in here we'll say if exclamation mark world dot has component entity game dot dying, meaning if he is not already dying, we'll say let dying equal new game dot dying. Then dying dot length will be equal to 1, and then world dot add component data entity dying. Now let's create our dying system for what happens when the dying component gets added to the character. So we'll create a new tiny system. We'll call it death system. Go ahead and open that file up. And inside of here, we'll say this.world.forEach. We're looking for a ut.entity and a game.dying. We'll call these entity and dying. Then inside of here, we'll say if dying.timeplayed is equal to 0, meaning dying just started. And then we'll say if this.world.hasComponent using the entity and game.animations, meaning does the entity have an animations component? If it does have an animations component, we'll say animation system dot play one shot this dot world entity 1 and 7, meaning the 7th animation, which is the death animation, and we want to play it for 1 second. Then we'll say if dying dot time played is greater than or equal to dying.length, game service dot set entity enabled this dot world entity and false. Then after that, we need to increase the dying.timeplayed by saying dying.timeplayed plus or equal to this.scheduler.delta time. Now, one more thing we need to do is go into our game services folder, and we are going to set the game services up to where if it has an animations component, it's going to disable all of the animations to make sure that none of the animations are still enabled when the parent component is disabled. So inside of here, we'll say if world.hasComponent entity game.animations. Now if it does have an animations component, we need to grab that component by saying let anim equal world.getComponent data from the entity game.animations and we'll say animation system dot disable animations using the world and anim. Let's go back into our Unity project. We can see that we have an error. It says dying does not exist. That must have been an old error, never mind. We actually need to go back into our scripts folder. Let's go into the attack system. And inside the attack system, we need to actually apply damage. We'll do that by going down to the apply hit impulse. We'll go one line below play one shot, and we'll say health system dot adjust health. The entity whose health we want to adjust is the destructible ENT. For the amount of damage we want to apply, we're going to create a new variable on this function that'll pass in the damage. So we'll say damage, which is a number, and then up here we can apply the damage. So on the first step of the combo, we'll do 5 damage, then 10 damage, then 15 damage. Let's go into our health system and finish the adjust health function by calling die. So we'll say this.die world and entity. Then just copy and paste that right here. And we're also going to console.log the entity's health to be able to see that it is taking damage. Let's go back into our Unity project and click play and see what errors we need to fix. Walk over to your enemy, attack him. You'll see that his current HP went down to 95, but let's remove this other debug so it's easier to read. Walk back over to your enemy, attack him. You'll notice his current HP is 95, his max HP is 100. We'll do another single attack, it drops to 90, so it's definitely doing 5 damage per single attack. Let's try a full combo. You can see on the first one it did 5 damage, on the second one it did 10 damage, and on the third one it did 60 damage. So it went from 90 to 85, from 85 to 75, then 75 to 60. It seems to be working. Let's kill the enemy and see if the death animation plays. The death animation did play, but you may have noticed we were able to attack him one more time after he had died. So let's see if we can fix that. We'll go back into our Unity project and into the script file. Let's go into our animation system, which we already are in, and there's a few things that we still need to add. Up here in our movement animation system, we need to say if it has a dying component, we do not want to play any of the movement animations. So we'll just copy and paste that and say game.dying instead of game.playOneShot. We'll then move down to the play animations function. And inside of here, we'll put an OR statement and say animations.state is equal to 7. We want to return, meaning is it doing the death animation? If so, don't play any other animations. Now, one last thing we're going to do is go back into our attack system, and inside of our world.forEach, we're going to add a subtractive filter to the lookup of the entities, so it will not look up certain entities. The entities that we do not want to look up are entities that have a dying component. So the way that we're going to do this is by adding 2 more brackets past the comma and before the parentheses, and we'll put another comma after the brackets. Then inside of here, we'll say ut.subtractive parentheses game.dying, another parentheses. So this will say we'll find all entities that have an ut.entity game.destructible ut.core2d.transform local position but does not have a game.dying component. So doing this should make it to where we cannot attack the enemy after he dies. And if somehow we did manage to, we have more functionality inside the animation system, stopping other animations from playing if the death animation is currently playing. So let's attack our enemy until he dies and see if we're able to attack him again after he dies. You'll see that we are unable to, but let's reload and try one more time just to make sure. Excellent. I think that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed everything we've done. In the next video, as stated before, we'll start adding in some AI control movement for the enemy so he is not just standing there. But until then, have a wonderful day, and if you enjoyed the video or any of the content I've released, please consider liking and subscribing. It would really help me out. Thank you, and goodbye.